Well, I've had this wonderful opportunity to spend almost 50 years in professional sports, and it's all about leadership at the end of the day. That's really what I've observed, and I really have been fascinated in watching these leaders for all these 5 decades. The thing that I notice about successful leaders, they have a sense of direction in which they're headed. Call it the vision thing, if you would, that Mr. Bush, the elder, introduced to the American vocabulary in 1988. But I think the vision thing is really what initiates great leadership, because leadership is about heading somewhere and having goals and having direction. And people are not going to follow unless they believe that leader really has a sense of where they're trying to take this enterprise. So vision and direction and goal orientation, I think, is absolutely the key indispensable piece of great leadership. That's what I've observed through these many years in pro sports, but it goes beyond that. It goes into any field of endeavor with leadership and vision. I think those two just have to be linked very, very tightly together to be a special leader. To be a good keynote speaker, to really deliver a message that leaves an impact, leaves a wallop, I think there are definitely some principles that have to be followed. Number one, you've got to know that audience. And I'm very, very bullish on the pre-call, you know, where you get on the phone with the meeting planners, with the people running that meeting, and I want to know everything. How many people are going to be there? What's the male-female breakdown? What's the age range? What field are these people in? What's the theme or the little quote for your meeting here? Do you have a little theme to the whole thing? What are their problems? What are they struggling with? How much time do I have? At the end of the day, what would be a home run as far as a talk? You've got to have all that nailed down in a conference call well in advance. Number two, that group has got to feel that you've prepared this speech just for them. You may have delivered it many times before, but it's got to be tailored in their mind and personalized so that they feel that they're getting a special effort by you. Number three, please have your speech organized. You know, have it absolutely nailed down so that people can follow what you're talking about. And I think people think in numbers. So Walt Disney's 5 secrets of success, the 7 keys to leadership excellence in the 21st century, the 8 ingredients it takes to have an outstanding team. People can really follow you. So, and if they want to take notes, they're capable of taking notes. Another huge important part are stories. People forget our pontificating, they forget our preaching, they forget our outlines many times. But they never forget the stories, never forget the illustrations. And we're hardwired to retain stories, not PowerPoints, thank goodness. You've got to have a strong opening. One of the things that always hits me about speaking, you've got about 20 seconds when you stand up to get that audience to really buy into you. And if they're not bought in that first 20 seconds, you're going to be struggling all night long. So you've got to have an absolute killer of an opener. It's like the launching of a plane, the takeoff of a plane. You've got to nail that opening, and you've got to also nail the closing with an emotional finish. You've got to land the plane successfully rather than just drifting and wandering out there. So I encourage speakers to perfect your start and perfect your ending, and then be highly organized in the middle. You're never there as a speaker. You're always learning. You're always adding new material. There are always ways to improve. I encourage speakers to go study other speakers, watch tape, watch video, do everything you can to pick up good things that they're doing and try and build that into what you're doing as a speaker. But we've got one mission across America: stamp out boring speeches and deliver vibrant, moving speeches that can change the world. I think business and sports really are related, and I think the business community can learn so much from the sports world. In fact, in my speaking, there's this incredible fascination in the sports world, or in the business world. What can we take from these sports teams, these sports leaders, and apply to our Fortune 500 company or to our widget factory? I'm just convinced that the corporate world is intrigued and fascinated with that. And in my writing and my speaking, I've really honed in on that. For example, in the area of teamwork, every corporation in America is trying to put their organization together and build a team. So the thought is, what can we learn from Vince Lombardi and his team building, Red Auerbach, Pat Summitt at Tennessee? What can we learn from Coach Wooden at UCLA? So I've put together a talk about the 8 qualities that it takes to be a great team, built on my sports background, but it's automatically transferable right into the corporate world. I've written 2 books on this topic about teamwork designed for the business community, and there's no question in my mind that right now the #1 issue on corporate America's mind is how do we make a team really come together and function properly, and what can we learn from the great sports team builders? Well, there's a great fascination with Walt Disney. I moved to Orlando 25 years ago, and I got Disneyized, which is very easy to do. But I kept running into senior Disney executives who had worked with Walt Disney back in California, years and years back. And every time I was with those men, I would pluck their brain to learn what I could about Walt Disney. And that led to 2 books, one called Go for the Magic, and then another book I wrote a few years ago called How to Be Like Walt Disney. I did countless interviews with those Disney legends who had worked with Walt back in the 20s and the 30s and the 40s. I'm so glad I got to them before they passed away. But Walt Disney is one of the great world figures of all time, has impacted the world maybe as much as any human being over the last 100 years, and will continue to do that for the next 100 years. But in studying Walt Disney's life, I learned that he had 5 secrets that allowed all of those dreams he had to come true. And I've built a talk around that, particularly in Orlando when corporations come and want something with a local flavor. And I talk about the 5 secrets that Walt had, which very quickly are make today pay off tomorrow. Number 2, free up your imagination. Number 3, strive for lasting quality. Number 4, stick to it-ivity. And number 5, have fun. Those were the 5 principles that really directed Walt Disney and allowed all of his dreams to become reality. That's what I learned. We have a very large family. We have 19 children. 14 we adopted from 4 foreign countries over a 10-year period, 1983 to 1993. 4 of our children are from South Korea, 4 from the Philippines, 2 from Romania, and 4 from Brazil. They are adults now. The youngest is 25, the oldest is 39. And there was no real game plan to this. I do know this, that for the first 10 years of our marriage, my wife talked incessantly about adopting children that didn't look like us. And I just couldn't fathom that. We had 3 birth kids, life was good. I was in Philadelphia at the time helping to build a championship team there. And I kept hearing, we need children that don't look like us. And at the 10-year mark, it really did become a major issue. And I realized I was going to have to take the initiative, and I did. And through an agency, we learned about 2 little girls from South Korea. They were 2 and 3 years old. They were available, and we qualified to adopt them. So in September of 1983, a few months after we had won the NBA championship, the 2 little girls arrived at the airport in Philadelphia, escorted by some off-duty flight attendants. And we suddenly had 5 children. And a year later, we had another birth kid. Now we had 6. And then we moved to Orlando, and we learned about twin boys from South Korea. We had a family vote, and the kids were all enthusiastic and said, let's go get these twin boys. They were 5 years old. And on May 1st, 1987, they arrived, and we now had 8 children. Over the next years, we learned about the Filipino boys, and then Romania fell apart, and there were kids coming out of there. And we just had a hard time saying no. I think that's the bottom line. There was no real strategy, no game plan. We never anticipated 1 year down the road when 16 of the kids would all be teenagers at the same time. And we'd have $80,000 a year food bills. And I mean, we never anticipated any of that. So I think at the end of the day, we just had a hard time saying no. And finally, we got to the point where we said, no more, we can't handle it anymore. We've expanded our house. We got 13 bedrooms and 8 bathrooms, and we can't wedge any more bedrooms in here. But that was it. I've learned that international adoption is not for every family, but to those with an adventuresome spirit, those with some risk-taking elements in their life, I do encourage families to explore it in depth. If I had to share one story that would absolutely rock the world, I think it would be related to teamwork, and in this area of teamwork. And it would relate to the first principle of outstanding teams. You've got to have outstanding talent. I was working on a book and putting it together, sending it out to different team builders. And Dr. Jack Ramsey responded to me, my first hire, my first mentor in pro basketball. And he said to me, "You're really doing a nice job with this book. You're putting it together well." He said, "But you have forgotten the most important ingredient that it takes to have a great team." And I leaned forward and said, "Yes, yes." And he said, "You've got to have the talent. You've got to have the talent. And if you don't have the talent, you know, it's tough to build a great team." So I talk in that opening part about the importance of building a team around great talent. And one of the points I make is that talent also has to understand that they've got to do it collectively as a team. Jameer Nelson, the point guard for the Magic, said years ago, he said, "My only goal in basketball is to be the best teammate that anybody's ever had." And I've thought long and hard about that statement. If that quote was posted in every business cubicle, every military unit, every locker room, boy, we would change the world in about a week. My only goal in this profession, my only goal in life is to be the best teammate that anybody has ever had. That's a life changer right there.